Welcome back to part 3 of Being a Disciple in an Election Year. So issue 3, which candidate is the threat to democracy? Now, when I wrote this, I thought this was going to be a very salient issue in the campaign. And I've read stuff from the Democrat side who are finding it's not that salient an issue, but I think it's still worth us considering. And so Donald Trump violated his oath of office when he tried to use unconstitutional means to stay in office in 2020. Now, to be clear, this is my view, not Vision New England, and sat idly by while extremists invaded the Capitol seeking to murder elected officials. Vice President Harris, who's been part of the Biden administration and the Biden campaign, worked with intelligence agencies and technology companies to suppress constitutionally protected speech, issues executive orders with no foundation in law, including ones President Biden has admitted there's no foundation in law and does it anyway, things like student loan forgiveness. And Vice President Harris supports all of that. In addition, she and he support stacking the Supreme Court to get decisions they just want to affirm their policies like these, they're illegal. So she's violated her oath of office, and I would argue is a threat to democracy and unfit to serve. Now, I know I've just probably raised a whole bunch of hackles, but and now we have no listeners left.
Oh, man.
I argue that we have 2 people running who are not fit to serve. Sergio, no, Enoch, you haven't started. Why don't you go first? I framed it fairly.
I'm never going to do this podcast again, Charles. So your listeners may not know, but you sent us these points a few weeks ago. When I got to this one, I just looked up and laughed out loud. I was I'm going to plead amateurism. I don't know. I'm not a legal scholar about, Constitution or law, but I'm a believer, picking up on what both Sergio and Ray have said in terms of right and wrong, evil, and doing what's good and seeking peace. I'm going to play the president has incredible power, and national politics, for a lot of good reasons, dominate our media. And in fact, when I talk to friends in Europe and Canada, American politics is on their headlines a lot. Yeah. I suppose it's because the American influence, whether economically or military and things, affects so many things, or it's just they like watching the drama unfold around the world. But I do think when it comes to the lives of an individual on a day-to-day basis, I'm not so sure how influential the president's policies are. Don't get me wrong. Obviously, they affect huge amounts of people, vast amounts of resources and money. But I feel like to love my neighbor and to seek I guess I think I have enough faith in American institutions and in general that neither of them, I see them as a viable existential threat to democracy, no more than many other politicians. Like when you're going through your bit, like people issue orders. I feel like candidates on all sides, well, I don't think they'd say they're violating their oaths. I think they would say they're actually trying to fulfill their oaths with the constraints of unjust laws or policies that are unnecessarily restraining them. Oh boy, maybe I should be a politician. So I
probably should have come with the oath they swear.
Yeah, publicly. Right. Yeah. Everyone always fast forward that part of the video, So, but yeah, I guess I'm not really. So, for example, the attack on the Capitol. While it is, there's a lot of things to condemn about that violence and that act, I think I'm with a lot of people that I don't really feel like American democracy was threatened. I'm not making light of violence, nor entering those hallowed halls where we're trying to work out this American project of democracy and freedom. So I very strongly condemn those acts, but I guess I have a robustness feeling that wasn't, if that building were to be irreparably destroyed, I don't have the impression that would destroy our deeper institutions and commitments as citizens of this country to freedom. That's just me. But Yeah, so I'll have a short answer and let the other two offend your guests more with their eloquence and experience. Like when Ray talked about Vietnam War, I had to Google that. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so yeah. But I get it, Charles. One more thing. That is just an incendiary question. That's all. That's just.
I recognize it is, but it really is where
No, it is. And honestly, a lot of people are with you on that. I get that. But I was thinking for your next future podcasts, I think you need people of more contentious spirits. Like I don't have a problem listening to people talk the entire time. I'm happy to listen and learn. If you want a more spicy interaction, then you probably need angry people or something to be here. But hopefully pastors aren't the most angry. I know we are, but hopefully, we're not the angriest of people.
But our goal is to model love even when we disagree. So I don't know that I want those contentious people.
Fair enough. And so I defer to the other two, better looking and wiser and elder statesmen.
Ray, what do you think?
Well, again, this is one of the situations where you could cite any number, again, of biblical precedents. Truthfulness, abuse of power. And I think ultimately all of us have to make some determination around, again, based on how much order, repression, other policies, and so on matter. And I can see that people will end up coming out in very different places. As I see it, I expect people to do a number of things in political order. David did it. Israelite kings down through the years did it. Herod, this is what I expect many powerful people to do. What matters to me are two things. Are those people willing to be subject? I mean, part of what our democracy is about is the fact that presidents or congresses or other groups are at times, sometimes thinking they're doing the right thing. They're going to abuse their power, which is why we have a judiciary that's supposed to keep them in check. And they're all supposed to keep each other in check, precisely because human beings make mistakes, sometimes for very venal reasons, but sometimes because they actually think they're doing the right thing. So I expect that. The January 6th event was significant for me. One, because we had not seen it in all of American history. Yeah. All of American. Even through a civil war, we didn't see this. That took more American lives than all of our other wars combined until I think shortly after Vietnam or whatever. So that and the comportment through that, what was even more telling to me was not just the attack on the institution, it's that you throw your own vice president under the bus. That to me speaks to character. So that's the lens through which I sort of make that apportionment, but I'm completely in agreement. There's no biblical set of scales that can sort of tell you this is worse than that. I do expect people in power to make mistakes, but the way they make those mistakes matters a lot to me.
And Ray, I'm remembering you reminding me of, I think it was a Hannah Arendt quote several years ago, probably back in 2017 even, where you said, it's okay to vote for the lesser of two evils. Just remember you voted for evil.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think that's where we've gotten tripped up some, is we've forgotten, right? We stick up for our evil guy as opposed to pointing out when they're doing something wrong and when they're doing something right.
This is, and let me say this. So this is going to be the greatest loss for the Christian church. Mm-hmm. It's fine to be honest and say, look, he's an evil or she's an evil or whatever person, but I think it is a lesser of two evils. I'm sorry that I've got to make either choice. What really, I think, turns off the public is when you have one set of standards for one party and another set of standards for another party. And what happens then is that people see very clearly, Jesus is not Lord. Your political affiliations are Lord. So that I think is going to be, in many ways, I mean, even I'd say on both sides, but I think that's going to be the biggest loss for the church, that it's dirty underwear. It's pretty clear. This is, you got one set of standards for one group of people and another set of standards for others. This is not about Jesus being Lord.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Sergio, what do you think?
I think we should not underestimate, the position of a leader. I think leaders matter. They're important. They we see it throughout the Bible. When a king will seek after God, and rulers, and I think that they're important. And the picture that comes to mind, and when I mean like leaders, I mean leaders in all different branches. They do matter. They're very important. They influence. They have power. The image that comes to mind, even though here in the Northeast we don't see it that much, like you don't need the manual brake in many of the vehicles. It's like back in our countries, we use them. Even when we're going down the hill, we use the regular brakes and the manual brakes, because otherwise you end up down the hill, crash. Or when you go to San Francisco, for instance, you definitely need them even to park your vehicles in some of the streets. Right here you don't use it that much. But the reason why I use this image is because I see that human tendency is towards destruction. It's as we shared in the first podcast, it was, there is evil in human's heart, and I think government are used to like sort of to slow down the deterioration of humankind, and that's why leadership and other branches are very important, to at least slow down the deterioration of humankind, which we see it in our society now. We are really in those days that we are calling evil good and good evil, and government does have responsibilities, and leadership is important. We see it in different countries, and like for instance, I live in Nicaragua. The reason why we left Nicaragua, I'm originally from Guatemala, but I have lived in Honduras and Nicaragua, and when we moved in Nicaragua was for a long term. We wanted to live there for 10, 15 years because of my dad's job. But when revolution came, we have to leave the country, never went back. And it was Daniel Ortega who was leading the Sandinists back then. And we see him today, there is not freedom in Nicaragua anymore. And so and I think that something we need to be very careful is like when you hear about natural phenomena like earthquake, nobody believed that earthquake could happen right there where you live. Guess what? Sometimes it happens, and I think we need to be aware and so how to protect and pray a lot. We need to pray that God will really choose someone that at least will be closer to some of the moral values that preserves the nation, and not any nation, but this nation, which I do believe that it was funded under with the Judeo Christian values, and I think leaders that are more aligned with those values, I think will be a bless for a nation.
Yeah, I'm still stuck with I can't. I don't know what to do. So I think sometimes that the best thing to do is figure out who will have the more institutional checks to keep them from subverting democracy, whether that's the election or whether that's chipping away at rights. And I wonder if you guys think that's a valid way to think about it. And if so, who do help me with who has the more institutional checks that will constrain them? And if not, then you don't have to answer the second part of the question.
Yeah, I think it's hard to know who's willing to be accountable. Even when they don't like the outcome, they recognize the importance. I am not the system.
Yeah.
I am a leader. I am not the leader. We don't need any Il Duces. We the Mussolinis. We don't need that. We are trusting in the fact that you're a fallible human being just like I am. You got to be accountable. Love FDR. Did phenomenal things, including helping save the world from the Nazis, right? Same FDR interned Japanese families, quite frankly, I think unethically unmoral. Had a hand in turning away Jews fleeing from Europe who went on to be exterminated in the death camps. Stacked the Supreme Court.
Wanted
to stack the Supreme Court. By the way, another correction. I said Barbaros was Latin, and it is in a way. The Romans kind of take it to the but it actually starts with the Greek. So I just want to be careful that I've stated it correctly. I don't expect leaders, because they're human beings, and as Sergio's pointed out before, evil is real and is a part of our nature. I don't expect them to be perfect. I'm looking for how willing they are to be accountable.
So let me. Can I jump back in? Just
I would just add in. I'd be okay with like mildly competent, by the way, but that's
right.
Sorry, Enoch, go ahead.
Yeah, no. Now that I've heard this stimulating thought, I guess there's a lot of issues we could go to. I was thinking about focusing on the defending democracy, but we've gone into important topics like leadership, character, things like that. So a couple of thoughts. Your last question was, is this a best way to frame it? It's a very defensive and cynical posture. I don't say that in a judgmental way, but which candidate will do the least damage? The way I think about life and my personality is not the way most people. I'm in general not a fanboy of anything except Jesus and my wife, pretty much. So I just don't give loyalty. I don't wear branded things publicly for those reasons. I don't post branded things publicly for those reasons. I'm actually very conscious of what little reputational influence I have to kind of go. I don't need it to be my favorite restaurant or fantasy writer or something. But that's not how most people are. If you have the lesser of two evils, a lot of people will throw all their weight into that lesser of two evils, because that's what's going to need to support them in the election, to win elections, and to make policy changes and legislative changes and executive change. So like there's a very different mentality and personality at play here. So I know a lot of people that would say, well, because I only like 70% of this person's policies, I'm going to support them 70%. And I kind of that's not how a lot of people are like, well, they throw our whole hand in with this candidate in this party. So I do think that if we're talking to Christians, thinking biblically about this, there's probably a million ways to approach this. But I don't know if you think about it, it's very dispensational or premillennial of you, Charles, to go, oh, as this whole thing is burning up, what's the way to have the least amount of fire, as opposed to, a more postmillennial view where God's kingdom is going to be set up on this earth, which is what, some of our Presbyterian brothers and sisters think. That it's just a very different theological view on, is the world sinking and burning and we're trying to save as many people as possible, which you hear those themes in American evangelicalism. I'm just here to preach the gospel, not worried about politics. Then you can engage politics just for the sake of doing good and mercy, or you can do politics like Calvin did for Geneva, where no, the point is to bring the kingdom of God, that we are called to go into the cultural world and do that. Right up at this moment, I'm finding authors that kind of are pointing out this sort of, I said this word already, I don't mean to pick on it, elitist mindset, like go into the power brokers of our culture, become those power brokers and wage a cultural war with the same tools as the enemy, but just with Christian values. And so I think that's a really serious, we're basically playing the game the world plays. And I guess to kind of go back in this, if my children ask me about this question, like, or the small children, I would say, not my adult children, I guess I'd help them understand that you do the best you can before the Lord, including everything, including who you vote for, if you have that privilege and responsibility, and then recognize and talk with them about how there are things I think are good about this platform, this candidate, this party, but there are other things that aren't as good, and then always refer them not to the other person, but refer all of us before the Lord Jesus, right? Because if we look at the other party and go, the world will absolutely be in horrible states if that party wins, we'll just do anything to keep them out of power. And that's how you justify storming a Capitol, if you're that unhappy. So those are just my thoughts about, like, I think we need to remember that, like Sergio said, leadership is really important, but we can advocate, but our hope really needs to be beyond the human leaders that we have.
For sure.
And so since you said I have a cynical perspective, I'll push back, but I think you might be right. There's a part of me that I'm like, well, I try to be Lily Tomlin. I try to be cynical, but they make it hard to keep up. and so, but I also think there's a little bit of, I can't remember if it was David Hackett Fisher or McCullough or some historian who talked about some of the founding fathers had a fatalistic optimism. There's no way we're going to beat Britain, so let's go do it. And I think that's where I kind of thought, this is a mess. This is a disaster. I don't see how we get our way out of it. So let's go do it.
Well, just a final note. I think I've always had a little bit of that cynicism, and I completely agree with Enoch about not attaching. I mean, certainly attached to people as individuals, but and Sergio is right. Leaders matter immensely. But I really need to be honest about who they are in the same way the Bible is. The Bible calls a man after God's own heart who has some wonderful characteristics, right? He also happens to be a murderer, an adulterer, an awful father, not just bad, I mean, awful, right?
Yep.
And whose deathbed speech sounds like it was written by the screenwriters for The Godfather. It's like Vito Corleone, right? So if the Bible itself tells me even those who have a heart to seek the Lord can do horrendous things, it presents all of these sins in vivid color, not just a sentence here or a phrase there, vivid color. We should be the last people to have any illusions about what leaders may do.
Great point. Yeah, great point. Sergio, last word.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, the conversation that you had in the past, it has been very edifying, because I think at the end of the day, yes, we definitely need to see beyond human leadership, our trust, because sometimes you can get so, like, for instance, I like politics. I love to follow politics, especially here in America, because over there in our country you have 25 different parties, just, and at the end they're all fighting, and then at the end you happen to see like one or two parties that just got there and they're like very new, so it's hard to really follow up. Here is like kind of easy, really, and it's, for me, it's easy to see like which party aligns more with biblical principles. It's like a night and day, it's like very clear. So in spite of that, yes, we need to see beyond. As Christians, we do need to see beyond, human leadership. And definitely our trust is in the Lord. And we need to remind ourselves constantly about this, because otherwise you can really get pulled into this just politic games,
Okay, last word. Thank you, Sergio. Join us next Sunday at 2 p.m. on Life Changing Radio or wherever you stream your podcasts to hear the next episode of Being a Disciple in an Election Year. Thanks for listening. To support this program and accelerate evangelism, go to visionnewengland.org and click on Donate, or click Member to become a partner with us. This program is supported by the Palau Association, who are dedicated to proclaiming the good news, uniting the church, and impacting cities worldwide.
At Leadership Transformations, we believe that when you have the right resources to help you slow down and experience a deep and refreshing connection to God, you can become the discerning leader you know you are created to be. Friends, Steve Macchia here, and I have a free gift for your soul. It's called Pathways. Pathways is our weekly email aimed at offering you soul-nourishing content for the journey. It contains readings, prayers, spiritual practices, a link to the Discerning Leader podcast, as well as information about all of our upcoming soul care retreats, workshops, and online offerings. So head on over to leadershiptransformations.org today and sign up for this free resource. It will help you slow down and be more. God bless you, friends.